It is Locked On Jazz for the 10th of June. Ask Locke. Hashtag Ask LOJ. What is Mike Conley's trade value? Why do people disrespect Rudy Gobert? Which of the coaching candidates would I want? What do Johnny Bryant and Alex Jensen bring to the table? It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Pow.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are interested in your opinions, so we have the survey out if you've not already done it at lockedonpodcast.com/survey. We'd greatly appreciate it if you get a chance. That would be super. All right, today is hashtag LOJ, so ask Locked On Jazz, and you guys have been great. The questions are truly remarkable. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Check out prizepicks.com. Use the promo code NBA to get to your app store and download the app today. PrizePicks is your daily fantasy made easy. So the Jazz have started the interview process. They have asked for permission for a bunch of players. They've started interviewing as well, from best of my understanding. I believe that some of the local candidates have had a moment already in which they have done their interview. So we are seeing, the process now begins to play out. And next week, we really haven't dug into the candidates great this week. There's been so many other things, the Danny interview and the rest. And if you did not catch the Danny Ainge interview, it's available at YouTube at Utah Jazz account. 17-minute sit down with Danny. So, next week, we'll dig into each of the coaching searches. I think we've got 5-6 weeks before this thing's over, so we'll have plenty of time. We'll get back to kind of looking at other teams around the league and whose players we might be interested in trying to take off their menu, and we'll continue our season in review. So we're still loaded with just a ton of different things to talk about. But I do want to get to Ask LOJ, and I'm so impressed. I went through all the hashtags last night and this morning, and I'm so impressed, and I want to thank you guys because you take this seriously, and particularly my final question of the day. But in all seriousness, I really appreciate you guys and the efforts that you play into this. So let's get to the questions of the day and start it off. Here's the first one. It comes from Rick. And if you're on YouTube, the questions are now on the screen. Cool little new graphics that we have here. Of all the main wings suggested in any Gobert trade over the last month, which would you do? Forget the other pieces and assume all is equal. OG Anunoby, who is about 6'8", 235-pound genius body from Toronto, and you're playing on OG Anunoby that he is ready to emerge as a star and has been held back by Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam, and if he's given his own team, he'd be ready to just completely explode. Patrick Williams, the young Florida State product who was injured for most of last year, has great upside, hasn't shown much yet, hasn't played much. DeAndre Hunter in Atlanta, you're kind of playing that same game that your estimation of him is he's got another step to go. Atlanta may not want to pay him as they have to pay Trae Young, and Kongu's going to be great, and they're going to have to pay him. I think they're going to be willing to pay Hunter. Andrew Wiggins, Golden State, Gordon Hayward. So Gordon Hayward is off my list. I'd have to do huge medical. That last ankle injury bothers me on Gordon. Gordon's been on my list the whole time. That it's the perfect addition to our team until that last ankle injury, and there's just a point where his body is failing him on a regular basis. Of these guys, Rick, who asked the question, seems to be siding toward that of Patrick Williams. He says 100%. I think, it's a really interesting question. So OG Anunoby, to me, is incredibly appealing because of his size, his switchability defensively. I think he's got more scoring in him. He's gone from 6 to 7 to 11 to 16 to 17 over the years. He's a pretty good shooter at 37%. He's not a great free throw shooter, so I don't know that continues. That's always the number you look at is free throw shooting of whether or not he's going to be able to do more. And he played his 2 years at Indiana. He was not a good free throw shooter in college at 52%. So shooting's not a natural thing for him. And I'd have to watch film of him and really understand whether or not he's got a wiggle or whether his drive game is just a straight line. Toronto moves the ball, gets some openings, and moves the ball. His shot attempts have gone from 5 to 6 to 8 to 12 to 15 over the years. So, it's just continually increasing. And this last year, his 2-point shooting percentage really dropped. It went from 58 2 years ago to 51 this year as they gave him the ball more. 2 years ago, I think is still Kawhi. And so I'd have to really look hard to figure out whether I thought he had a primary go-to scorer aspect. My instinct is no. His long two shooting in his career for OG Anunoby is 29%. His mid-range two, like 10 to 16 feet, is 37%. His floater game is non-existent at 32%. Those things lead me to believe that would be a hard next step for him. DeAndre Hunter is not as big, not as athletically awesome, but he's still 6'8", 225, can do an awful lot of things. He is showing injuries have got him. He played 62, then 23, then 53 this year. So, that's the concern on him. Obviously, anyone's got a concern. You have to have a scouting report that breaks through that. His 3-point shooting's just been 36, but his free throw shooting is 79, and at Virginia was 77. So again, still not super. The one thing on him at Virginia is, he's pretty quiet that first year, just 20 minutes a game. Then he's 32 in Tony Bennett's system. And there's been this we look at his body and we love him and we want him to do more. And, the league's evolving that's the size and position that you want to have. But he wasn't like a dominating force in college. He was really good. And that makes me wonder a little bit. His mid-range game is not one that's ready to explode onto an NBA scene. But he's interesting. He's super good defensively. He's a 4th pick of a draft. He's got the perfect body. So both those guys are great, great body players. Now, whether I would trade either of them for Rudy, I'm not sure. I think Rudy puts you at 50 wins by being on your team. And I kind of like that. All right. William Hedrick says, how do you see Jordan Clarkson fitting in without Quin letting him play his game? Or do you see JC of previous years or even a JC trade? Fundamentally, this is the key. These are great questions. Fundamentally, this is the key question the Utah Jazz have to figure out in the front office. Is players on this roster, were any of them unique to what Quin brought to the table and played in a manner that was unique to Quin that is not going to work for the Jazz moving forward? And so Jordan Clarkson's the first one on this list. There's just no question. Do you believe that Jordan Clarkson, in the manner in which he played for Quin Snyder and in that freedom, is a productive player? 2, do you believe that that Jordan can do that again under the next head coach? So has Jordan just become a better basketball player? I lean there. I lean that Jordan has just become a better basketball player as he's matured. Certainly was freed by Quin and a lot of that aspect of things, but in turn, because of that, has become a better basketball player. He was, frankly, you watch the playoffs right now and you just have to be drivers. And we really only have 2 drivers on our whole roster, Donovan Mitchell and Jordan Clarkson. And so to me, Jordan seems as important as ever in our roster construction. And that's, what did Danny say in the interview we did? Some players you have to rein in. Some players you've got to let push out. You've got to manage each person a little bit differently. This is a case where we're going to find out with the next head coach, how can they manage JC? Jeff Watkinson was his assistant last year and did, amazing work. Has been with him. And as if you've listened to the show a lot, my belief is that Jordan's funky start was largely because Jeff was coming off an Achilles tendon and he was not around. And that once Jeff came back and was kind of back as the Jordan whisperer, then Jordan kind of calmed down and really played better. And so my bigger concern would just be a brand new coaching staff in a new circumstance. Jordan's particularly hard on himself. Jordan is particularly driven, despite kind of his chill approach. Like his thing he did with Kristen Kenny many years ago about zero, meaning zero thought. Like that's because his thoughts are often too hard on himself and too negative and too frantic. And so what voice is going to be there for Jordan would be the bigger question for me. But I think Jordan's just improved as a basketball player. And so generally he should be all right. Our next question comes from Spencer. Spencer's always great for us with stuff. Would the loser of the Hornets head coaching job make sense for the Utah Jazz, Kenny Atkinson or Mike D'Antoni? Why or why not? So having listened to Danny, he talks about a partner and he talks about someone to work with and he wants to be a working situation. Mike D'Antoni's got his way he wants to do things at this point in time. And those would just have to be correlated. Do Danny and Mike see the same game being played the same way with the same purpose? And that, I don't know the answer to that. That would just be a philosophical question of, do they believe the game should be played the same way? As they do. The other, Kenny Atkinson's really interesting to me as a coach because he's got the head coaching experience. He's coming off, I believe, the pop tree somewhere along the way. I'd have to check that. I do think that's right. And he's a good player development coach. A little bit, this might be where we're heading, though I think he's getting branded that a little bit too much. He's got his last 2 years to me are really interesting in the sense that he went to the Clippers and the Warriors and saw how two other teams are doing it. Kenny's not off the pop trees, off the bud tree. He was in Atlanta and with the Knicks before that. I think he's really interesting. Like he was coaching in Paris for 3 years. Then he goes in as assistant for the Knicks for 5. Then he's an assistant with Atlanta for 4. I thought he did a good job in Brooklyn and then got caught in all the mess of it. As a player, he just bounced around everywhere. I mean, he's a Richmond Spider out of college. He's graduates in 1990, and then he goes and plays, if I remember correctly, in like Wichita, Long Island, Paris, Israel. I only thing I actually really remember is my prep for him when he was a head coach is that one of the teams he played for was nicknamed the Astronauts. I don't know what that means, but this is a guy who just kind of has battled, traveled, basketball lifer. I'm super intrigued by Kenny Atkinson, I'll be honest. I think he's... now, I also hear he has the Charlotte gig. So if we don't... And he's on the Warrior staff. If we don't hear him announced for the Charlotte gig, almost immediately after this series is over, that would be kind of a tip that maybe something funky is going on. Friday edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by our good friends over at Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. They've done Murdoch family has been with us for over 80 years in Utah, and they've done a really neat thing recently where they are not charging you more than MSRP despite the car shortage. And the cars for the Hyundais are amazing. If you're looking for an electric car, you don't have to buy a Tesla. Like Murdoch's got some incredible electric cars. I went and test drove them with my dad because my dad lives in California and was looking for a electric car. They're hard to get, and so he actually came out here and test drove one out here. It was sweet. Like it actually would probably be, if I was to buy another car, I would either buy, my next car would either be the Hyundai Electric or maybe the Hyundai Santa Fe Hybrid. My wife was actually looking at those and informed me how much it would cost yesterday, as though it was like a hint that maybe that's something we should be doing. They're really sweet. So that's located at Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. Feel free to email me first at dlock09@gmail.com, and I'll set you up with a VIP meeting over at our good friends at Murdoch Hyundai. Today's show is also brought to you by BetOnline. Go to betonline.net for all the latest in sports gaming and news and information and the rest. Tonight's game between the Celtics and the Golden State Warriors. The line on the series now is Warriors minus 185 or plus 185, Celtics plus 215. So a lot of odds there. Celtics are favored for the game tonight as a 4-point favorite with the money line at 160 and the over-under at 214. There's all sorts of NBA specials. The coaching bet for the Utah Jazz, the line right now is Johnny Bryant plus 225, Terry Stotts plus 250, Alex Jensen, Adrian Griffin plus 500, Will Hardy plus 900, Joe Mazzulla plus 900, Chris Quinn plus 900, Charles Lee plus 1,200, Frank Vogel plus 1,200. They have Dell Demps on there, but he just took an assistant general manager job in Minnesota. Congratulations to Dell. Good dude. Mike D'Antoni plus 200 and Jerome Allen plus 2,500. Kevin Young also in there at plus 1,600. So those are the betonline.net odds for BetOnline, where the game begins. Thanks very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. I greatly appreciate it, and thank you very much. If for your second listen today, get on the Locked On NBA Big Board. They've been doing some great stuff. Continuing with our Ask LOJ Day, why do people undervalue Rudy Gobert on his age? The dude's in amazing physical condition. He's built more like Giannis than Al Jefferson. No one questions whether or not Giannis will be elite past 35. His value should be extremely high. So I think people devalue Rudy as the game's evolving. The fear on Rudy is he's going to become Roy Hibbert. I don't think that's the case because of Rudy's athleticism. But we are seeing this trend we've talked about a good deal on Locked On Jazz, where to be a good NBA team, you're denying the rim, but to be a good NBA playoff team, you don't go to the rim offensively. Now, ironically, in Game 3 of that series, Boston just attacked the tin the entire night. That was really what Boston went after and played attacking the rim, because while Golden State rotates and shifts, they don't have a pure rim defender, and suddenly they got exposed in that way. And then they didn't have any rebounding once the rim got attacked, and they allowed 50% of all of Boston's half-court misses to be offensive rebounds, which is an incredible number. So there's this yin and yang and give and back and forth in all of these that get awfully interesting. I don't, Rudy has had some knee issues. He revealed that he had an MRI at the end of the season. I don't think he's relying a great deal on bounce and things, and I do think he'll slow down, but I think he should be all right. I would be surprised, to your point, Ryan. I generally agree with you. He's probably the best conditioned athlete in the NBA. He's taking care of himself. He literally has grown a garden in his house to make sure he's growing natural food and eating, naturally grown food. He's climbing, he's running mountains. I think I generally agree with you that his elite conditioning will keep him in high level position. Coming from Kirk, any chance Etore Messina gets a look, and how many picks would it trade Mike Conley to Detroit for Jeremy Grant? So, first question here is, that's a super interesting name. I think he closed the door on his NBA career when he went back this last time. I also think he's getting older, but I could be wrong on that. But that's, great. Again, you guys are the best. It's incredible, your knowledge of things. Etore Messina, he's only 62. He just European, looks older. For those who don't know him, he was an assistant for Pop for a little while. He and Q were actually super close. He was with the Lakers. He's been the best coach in Europe for a long time. CSKA Moscow head coach. But he's back doing Olympia Milano. He's been the 4-time EuroLeague champion, I think 3-time coach of the year. He's one of the greatest EuroLeague people of all time. So, he's just got an incredible resume of coaching. I think the David Blatt experiment didn't work, and we're slow, we're a little slow on that. I think there's, on the whole question of whether there's going to be a woman's coach in the NBA, I actually think there could be a woman coach in the NBA before we go to another pure European League coach who has not had NBA experience. Now, that's not Etore Messina. He actually has some NBA experience, but it's a good question. From Brandon, how does Snyder stepping down relate to the attitudes of... Oh, wait, you asked another question there. I'll have to... let's go back. There was part 2. You should never do this. In interviewing people, you should only ask one question at a time. You'll only get one question answered. So never ask 2 questions. Like number 1 rule of interviewing, Kirk. If you're asking LOJ, one question at a time, because I won't get to the second one. That's actually like if you listen to the Danny Ainge interview, I'm very careful to never try to ask 2 questions at once. How many picks would it take to trade Mike Conley to Detroit for Jeremy Grant? Well, Jeremy Grant in Detroit's mind is going to cost a first-round pick. That's what they wanted from Portland, and Portland lost their pick. We don't have that first-round pick. So it would be down the road. And then Mike Conley's contract, unless Detroit thinks that they could move Mike Conley again for another pick, which they probably could, might cost us something else. So maybe one. I don't know. Here's the thing on us. We're short draft capital right now. And you've got to be looking down the road a little while. And I thought Danny's comment that we're a little bit in flux, you're not quite sure where we're going as a franchise, was pretty interesting in that interview. So if there's a chance that we are trading Donovan and Rudy sometime soon and moving into a reload process, then giving away future draft picks gets a little tricky, because you better believe you need all of them if you're taking as many shots at the apple as you can. So trading Mike Conley for Jeremy Grant but giving up a pick is interesting. Now, I find myself, if you had to push me, and none of these decisions are 100-0, that my answer to what we should do is probably try to add a third marquee player. I don't know if Jeremy Grant's that player, but maybe. And then and take a shot at it. And if it doesn't work, then unload everyone next year and stockpile our picks that way, but not do it now. So in your sense, that might be Kirk. That might make it worth it. These are all none of these are 100% zero, so they're interesting. All right, here's Brandon. How does Snyder stepping down relate to the attitudes of the Jazz players, more specifically Conley, Mitchell, and Gobert? And see, here's the second question. Also, does this decrease or increase the probability of Mitchell re-signing, Gobert re-signing the next 2 to 4 years? So the second question is one on everyone's mind. The national media has made it a story that the coaching change makes it more likely that Mitchell and Gobert are going to leave or we're going to trade. I'm not sure I see that. I don't see them truly related. If you believe Quin, that we needed a new voice, and in some way is great, despite the fact that Quin is a top 5 coach, maybe better in the NBA, that somehow we needed a new voice. If in fact we did really need a new voice, then actually it's necessary for Quin to move on, and then it increases the probability of them staying, because if Quin's actually right that he couldn't coach this team, reach this team anymore, then that was a bad script to move forward with. So in that sense, I think what Quin is saying, if you're with Quin on that, then I would say that's telling. I don't know that I think that these things I'm not entirely convinced. I think the coaching change impacts Mitchell re-signing or Gobert re-signing until we see what the coaching change is and we see how they react to him. In other words, as of right now, I think I don't see it. How does Snyder stepping down relate to the attitudes of Conley, Mitchell, and Gobert? So Mike, we saw, doesn't deal with change great, right? That change from Memphis to Utah year wasn't great. So that'll be interesting to see how Mike deals with a new coach. Was that just a unique situation where he's not being used the same as he's at a different point? He's a pretty great dude. So will he handle it better? Is there something too that he actually struggled with that? Donovan's at a stage now where he's an all-star, 3-time all-star, and he wants to make sure things are going to be, serve him well, that he's at high enough status that he wants to make sure whoever this next coach is going to be, have him prepared and ready and in good shape. So I think, how does it affect his attitude? I would guess that at first Donovan will be a bit skeptical and then have to be won over. And I think Rudy will be the same thing. For 8 years, Quin Snyder built Rudy up into a 3-time all-star. And so I think that the next head coach, that's going to be their job, is to get these guys to buy in and believe. And they're probably, they probably are, those guys are probably going to be a little skeptical of what they have because they've had the same guy for their entire careers. And now they need to see something else. Today's show, we'll get to your final set of questions and some fun ones. Again, thank you guys so much. They've been just so great. Today's show is brought to you in part by Sakara. Sakara, And Sakara is a wellness company anchored in food as medicine on a mission to nourish your body through the power of plants. Now, what? So basically, they give you the tools to transform your life with the organic, ready-to-eat meal delivery program and functional wellness essentials. Their nutritionally designed, chef-crafted breakfasts, lunch, and dinners are made with powerful plant-rich ingredients. They help boost your energy, support your digestion, curb your sugar cravings. Boy, do I ever need that. Get your skin glowing. Plus, it's easy, all delivered right to your door, ready to eat. Sakara's functional, plant-rich wellness essentials help you create a body you love living in. From their best-selling Metabolism Super Powder to the Foundation, their daily supplement packs, Sakara's products are designed to support your wellness goals anytime. Check it out. Go to sakara.com/lockedon20. That'll get you 20% off your first order. When you go to sakara.com/lockedon20, that's SAKARA.com/lockedon20, 20% off your first order. Sakara.com/lockedon20. Today's show is also brought to you by our good friends over at Built. What's the latest? What's the product? What's the surprise when you go to Built.com right now? The surprise right now is you get a free shaker bottle when you buy any 2 or more bags of Built Boost. Granola bars are still there. Coconut, peanut, chocolate, peanut butter brownie, and white chocolate berry. Grasshopper cookie, sold out. Coconut marshmallow puffs, sold out. But brownie batter puffs are still there. The caramel brownie bar is back. The orange bar is back. All the regular flavors and the macros are still just truly amazing. 130 calories, 2.5 fat grams, 4 net carbs, 4 sugars, 6 grams of fiber, and 16 grams of protein. It's all at Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and you will get yourself a 15% welcome or 15% discount with the promo code LOCKED15. Thanks very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen. If you get a chance, go over that survey, lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. If you were the Jazz, what coach would you hire? I have no idea. I'll be totally honest. And I actually think anybody who picks a favorite at this point is fooling. Now, I have always been really impressed by Frank Vogel and Terry Stotts. Those are the 2 guys I know as head coaches. I think Terry Stotts got a raw deal in Portland. I think he showed the understanding of a franchise at the exact same spot of where the Jazz are. I think he's shown he's a good playoff coach. I think he's shown he's a brilliant offensive coach. I think he would do masterful work with Rudy Gobert. So if they were to hire Terry Stotts, I'm 100% comfortable with it. I get it. Like, I like Terry as a person. I think he's a really good follow-up to Quin in the sense that he's really, really smart, but really, really calm and mellow. And so they're different while still, like, I think the worry that you have following Quin is that he prepared them so well that any new coach comes in and players are thinking to themselves like, well, we're not as well prepared as we were last year. With Terry, I think you would be as well prepared as you were with Quin, with just kind of a calmer, less chaotic personality. I don't know if chaotic's the right word. Frenetic might be a better word than chaotic. Quin always so good with the words and detailed words. You got to choose them right. So I know Terry well. Frank, I don't know as well, but I was always impressed. Orlando didn't work out, but nobody's worked out in Orlando. So I kind of dismissed that. He won a title in LA and then got caught in the Russell Westbrook mess last year. That's probably not his personality to deal with that. And unless he's just worn down and scarred from that, which would be what I would be really concerned. I thought he did a brilliant job in Indiana. You have playoff history. You have understanding he's a great defensive coach, or at least that's how he's labeled because he had great defensive players. So I think, those 2 coaches that have coaching experience and then Kenny Atkinson, all 3 of those, if Kenny were to become a candidate, really comfortable with. The 3 guys I know are Alex, Jensen, Johnny Bryant, and Lamar Skeeter. And I'm going to call around this weekend on other guys so that I can give you insight. So Alex, crazy smart. Same thing would fit the same thing as Terry Stotts, as you'd always feel well prepared. You wouldn't have to worry about much calmer, much quieter. Does that quiet personality command a locker room? And the size probably helps him in that. He would simplify things a great deal. Johnny, I think would bring a little more fire, at least in my interactions with him, but maybe that was our relationship. He kind of was always on me. Great player relations, great player development, understands what the player wants. I don't know his X's and O's acumen because there's been no sign to see it because he's never been a head coach. And he increased a great deal when he was with the Jazz, and I just didn't see what he's done the last 2 years in New York. Lamar Skeeter's players really enjoy him. He's a calm guy, another real true coach's coach. Was one of the best soccer players in the country out of Ohio. Quit to play basketball, played at a small Division 2 or 3 school, if I remember correctly, just because he loves the game, then got into coaching. He's come up through Bud and through Quin, so he's had incredible access to coaching, and enjoy him a great deal as a person. And, it seems early for his to be, but maybe this is more of, hey, we really want to keep you on board. And I would suspect that the sign that they're interviewing him is more of a sign he'll be back on the roster next year. So I don't know. It's a great question. It's a question everybody wants to know. I don't know. Do you have any idea what Mike Conley's trade value is? This is a great question. Mike's at an interesting stage in his career is really what you're alluding to, that he's older. He had an incredible regular season and then a bad playoff. But I think we got to remember what a good regular season he had. And I think teams are going to see that. I mean, Mike he shot 42 or 3% from 41% from three. He was the number 1 or 2 off the bounce 3-point shooter in the NBA. Plus minus was good. He's played 72 games without any problems. So I think if there's the right mix, he doesn't have a negative value. You don't have to throw a pick in. I think you can just swap salaries for equal level players. So if if the Clippers want a point guard, do they have $20 million of player that you're willing to come back you think is of equal value for the Utah Jazz? The Knicks need a point guard. Do the Knicks have $20 million? I think Mike's at $20 million. That bring back the other way. I think Mike has he's just value. He's not negative in any way, shape, or form. He's good, but he's not bringing you he's not a star at this age of his career. But I do think somebody could say, we're just better by adding Mike Conley, even if he's 34 years old and in our desperate need for a point guard right now. If you add Mike and a pick, you've got a pretty good package for someone. But I don't know if you're adding Mike and a pick to somebody, who they're, what it is that where they are as a franchise. Do you think Quin's timing screwed us over in the sense that if he would have done this right after the season ended, the Jazz would have had access to the best choices, i.e. Darvin Ham? So Darvin Ham's actually the only one I can think of there. Because I think if Kenny Atkinson wanted to come to, unless he's already signed a deal with Charlotte, if Kenny Atkinson wanted to suddenly talk to the Jazz, he has time to do it right now. So I don't think he did screw the Jazz in that sense. If you had to pick a player that's currently on the roster that takes a leap forward and increases their role, who would you choose? Seems like NAW has the tools, Doak has the draft capital, Butler looked good in spurts. What are your thoughts? I think it's Jared Butler, but his size is still problematic. I mean, he's small. And at times he looked great, and at times he looked completely like the speed of the game had altered him. But I think he's got that hesitation game. Dribble skill is real. And as he gets better in his second year, which is a natural thing, and then he'll really get better in his second or third year, I think that's probably the guy that we're talking about. JCW, to help me sort out feelings of Quin's leaving, does anyone have any idea, or is anyone talking in your circle that knows if Pop is actually getting close to retiring? Part 2, if he goes to San Antonio, who do you think being the successor of Pop? If he does go to San Antonio, how do you think being the successor of Pop will go? I think everyone's kind of waiting for Pop to retire. He's got the records, and I think he just still likes it. Frankly, the circles were that he was going to retire this year, but then he didn't. And you kind of look back, and Will Hardy leaves San Antonio and goes to Boston, and Becky Hammond leaves and goes to Las Vegas Aces. Maybe they all knew he wasn't retiring because they weren't sticking around for the job. But Quin has got a great relationship with R.C. Buford, who's their president from when he was with the Austin Toros. I think it was the Austin Toros then. Maybe it's the Austin Spurs. So it's totally reasonable that Quin next year would be the one to replace Pop. Pop and Quin still have a good relationship. And I just think Quin will have success wherever he is. I don't think there's a scenario that's too big for Quin. He thinks everything through about it a great deal. All right. Did that one not come through? There we go. Do you believe we get to this breaking point in the locker room if Georges and Joe are still on the team, George Niang? So I actually think it's George and Derek Favors were the recent departures were what caused the locker room to have some problems. Not Joe. Partially because I just think we missed Joe the player. But I think that the personalities and attitudes of George Niang and Derek Favors were the ones that were greatly missed in the locker room this year more than anything else. What's something that Johnny Bryant or Alex Jensen could bring to the table as a head coach that would make the Jazz a better team next season? I don't want to stereotype these guys into one single thing, but Alex is a smart, calm, cerebral, experienced, simple, like he simplifies things as a coach. Johnny is a basketball core and core through him. He's, as I said earlier, my interactions would be more fiery. Also very bright basketball and person. I think he probably, he's younger, gets on a player level a little bit. Has had great player development background. I've had great conversations with both of them that are like both on-court, off-court items that are super intellectual. So I think that, at least from my experience, both of them would be able to, sit down with a player and talk about life and are great communicators in that sense. Those would be the strengths, I think, of those two candidates. All right, our last and final question, and the most important one of the day. Waffles, pancakes, or French toast? Choose one. Explain your answer as if you were going to try to kill dead air in a 20-second timeout. Great debate, because I think it depends on the restaurant, because each of these can be done better. I'm generally a French toast guy, but it's got to be good. It's got to be thick bread. The best ever was the challah bread French toast at Alki Bakery in Seattle. But a really, really good waffle is better than a really, really good French toast. And the pancakes in various places are amazing, including, like, if you ever want a special day up at the Deer Valley Montage pancakes are amazing. Now, here's the real question. I don't eat these things anymore because I'm 50, but I'm closer to death than I've ever been in my whole life. So why aren't I eating more of these? When I was 20 and 25 and 30 and going out for breakfast with my kids at 30, I was eating them all the time. It's all I ever ate. Now at 50, I'm like, I can't have that. Why not? I'm closer to death. I should be eating more French toast. Have a great day. That is Locked On Jazz.